Rupiwa, you're looking at the jobs emergency this hour and what needs to be done.
That's right, Marcel. So you'll remember that President Cyril Ramaphosa says that addressing the high unemployment rate isn't government's responsibility alone. He's called on the banking and other private sectors to come on board. But the government will need to structure policies and legislation in such a way to drive employment creators. Joining me now to discuss this is Kashif Wicomb, who's the Chief Executive Officer at eNCA Construction. Thank you very much for your time this evening. And that's one of the big debates at the moment, trying to drag down those high levels of unemployment, particularly youth unemployment. And as the President weighs in on the issue, saying that the private sector needs to get on board alongside government, what exactly should we be seeing in terms of partnerships and policies to ensure that we reverse the scourge?
Good evening. Thank you, Rafiu, and thank you for having us. And tonight I'm sitting as the president of the Progressive Professionals Forum and addressing you and the nation with regards to the January 8th statement of the African National Congress. Now, throughout the history of South Africa, and certainly post-democracy, 1994, there's always been a commitment to job creation and encouragement of SMMEs. But if one looks at the policies and the red tape around the state, and it encourages SMEs, and the two don't quite match. And if you look at globally, Rafiu, and I did this early on, the countries with which has the largest new business formations in 2020 was UK at 101% new businesses for the 2020 year, US at 86%, Australia at 73%, Germany 62%, and Canada at 58%. And there are 10 indicators which the World Bank and the World Economic Forum uses to determine whether a country is SME friendly. And why do we speak about SMEs? To go back to your statement, it is the duty of the state, it is the duty of the private sector to not only speak about job seekers, but to speak about job creators. And when we speak about job creators, then of course, we speak about a society, a sector, an environment, a policy, a legal framework, which is investment friendly and SMME and entrepreneur friendly.
You had indicated earlier, Kashif, that there's a bit of a misnomer or a bit of an imbalance when it comes to legislation, in that legislation is all for the employee, but when it comes to the employer or any business looking to operate within the environment, it makes it very tough for them to navigate the economy because of that legislation. How do we create that balance then? Because it's going to be important as well as we work towards what you've just explained now in terms of creating employers rather than seekers of work?
I think that's a very difficult one. On the one hand, you need to protect employees, and you've got labor law which governs that. And on the other hand, you also want to make it easy for an employer to appoint an employee, and where the employee doesn't quite deliver on the KPIs which they've agreed to, the path to suspending or to appointing another employee, another staff member, should be a lot easier than what it is now. That's the one thing. The second thing, and I think I spoke to you this earlier, one of the 10 indicators of creating employers is, for example, the registration of properties. And I confirmed this. A friend of mine registered a property in Turkey. He's a foreigner, remember. He bought the property in Turkey, a flat. It took him 2 hours to transfer the property from the seller to him, the purchaser. Now, if you just take that and you compare that to how long it takes to register a property in South Africa, 8 weeks up to 3 months, then already there is an indicator. I think that's the first point. The second point, we must look at Afrikaner empowerment, and I mention this often. Afrikaner empowerment, forget the ideology and forget the morals thereof, but Afrikaner empowerment worked. And one of the legs on which Afrikaner empowerment was built was cooperatives. Our agricultural sector, pre or during apartheid, had a booming agriculture sector. Those farmers sold to a co-op, and the co-op marketed the deciduous fruit globally and internationally. And so therefore then, when President Ramaphosa, and he touched on cooperatives, when we speak about that, there must be this focus of creating SMMEs, but also of unifying SMMEs in order that they can provide products and service at a national and global level.
I'm wondering, as you say that, and I'm sure other viewers as well, Afrikaner empowerment is something that a lot of us maybe are not familiar with. And as you talk, I was thinking, shouldn't we use that expertise that you say they have in agriculture, for example, to continue to empower the majority of the population in South Africa, which is not Afrikaner, that those skills are transferred to those who will be taking the country forward? Why is the conversation not going in that direction, but rather empowering what many would say is a minority in the country?
I think, first of all, when one speaks about an investment-friendly environment, an investment-friendly environment is based on three legs: infrastructure, and of course we've got load shedding, and that needs to be addressed urgently, which the President covered yesterday and before. Two, a private sector which is growing. And then three, a public sector which is competent and professional and patriotic. And maybe this is the long answer to your short question. When we speak about the public sector, we also speak about state-owned enterprises. We speak about municipalities. We speak about town engineers. And we speak about competent technical persons in those positions. Now, for example, whether that competency comes from an old Afrikaner 60-year-old engineer who is willing and able and patriotic to transfer his skill set to young South Africans, young black South Africans, then that is the advantage we must take of. Again, if you look at South Africa during the apartheid state, Spoornet was purely established to employ young Afrikaners and provide them with technical skills as they came out of high school. There is absolutely no reason why Transnet could not have done the same. There is absolutely no reason why Eskom could not have done the same. But then, of course, those young engineers must be committed and mustn't put their fingers into the pot like we have seen, and which leads them to a lack of service delivery at all levels of government. So yes, we must make use of competent, experienced technicians and engineers who will transfer their skill set to young black South Africans to ensure that we have competent SOEs that can deliver services and ultimately can ensure that we have a stable economy, a working economy, and a growing private sector together with the public sector to address the 45% unemployment which faces us as a nation.
And then, of course, when we talk about policies, in the immediate term, what kind of policy changes would start to get the ball rolling to integrate small to medium businesses into the economy so that they do become the employers that we've just discussed?
I think as the Progressive Professionals Forum, we've always encouraged cooperatives, and so therefore then when the speaks about preferential procurement policies, there must be a sector like there is a sector for youth-owned, female-owned people with disabilities. There must be a preferential sector for SMEs which have come together into co-ops in order to provide services and goods to the state at a provincial and national level, number one. Number two, the President spoke about the fourth industrial revolution. The Competition Commission must look into the cost of data in South Africa versus other countries. Cost of data is key. In fact, again, if you look at the emergence and the resurgence of SMEs 2020 and post-2020 after the COVID-19 pandemic, all of that, or most of that, was in online businesses. In fact, in Brazil, from 2019 to 2020, online businesses grew by 208%. In order to do that, you need a stable fiber, and you need a secure internet, and you, of course, need a cost-effective, cheap internet. And, of course, what e-commerce does, it allows your SME who operates from his garage or a little workshop somewhere to provide his goods and services, or his goods nationally and internationally. So I think that would be the second indicator. If we, the third indicator would definitely be not only a commitment to cut red tape and to register businesses, but a high-level impact at all levels to ensure that if I want to register a business, I can do that within a matter of hours. If I want to sell goods and services to the state, armed with my tax clearance certificate and all the other requirements, which I must be able to get within hours, I must be able to do so, because the state is the largest procurer of goods and services, yet the state is also the one bedeviled with red tape, which prevents SMEs from providing goods and services to the state at all levels of government. So certainly those are three or so of the many indicators which the state must use in 2023 in order to meet up with President Ramaphosa's commitment to tackling the unemployment and to creating an environment, an enabling environment for business and more specifically SMMEs.
Thank you very much for those interesting insights. Mr. Kashif Wicomb is the president of the Progressive Professionals Forum, representing that body this evening in that engagement on unemployment.